Hey, what up, fish friends? Michael with Freshflow Aquatics here. Today I'm going to be going over 4.5 different ways to get rid of nitrates in your freshwater aquarium. You might be wondering, what is a half method for getting rid of nitrates? Well, that one was so easy, I decided to give it a half point. Stick around to the end and I'll go over that. Nitrates are unavoidable when it comes to keeping a freshwater aquarium. It's basically a waste product. What happens is fish will poop, that poop gets broken down into ammonia, and then nitrites, and then nitrates through the nitrogen cycle. Gradually, over the week or 2 weeks in between water changes, nitrates can build up in your fish tank. A little bit of nitrates aren't a big deal, but as soon as levels start to reach 30 or 40 parts per million, that's when I get concerned. What happens when the nitrate levels are too high in your fish tank is it can result in toxic levels for fish. So depending on the fish, they're going to have different levels for what they can tolerate. Really sensitive fish can almost have no nitrates in the water, whereas really hardy fish can tolerate excessive levels of nitrates. Regardless, I still like to keep mine low because it's just a safe way to make sure that your fish are going to be healthy. Now, the first way to get rid of nitrates in a tank is just by doing water changes. It's such a simple process. All you do is take water out of your fish tank and replace it with clean water. In the overwhelming majority of cases, tap water is a perfect solution for people. There may be some exceptions where people have extremely hard or acidic tap water, or they're on well water, which might not work for their tanks. In those cases, you can use reverse osmosis water, or you can buy water from your fish store. I'm a big fan of doing 50% water changes, and I know a lot of people are like, well, that's a lot of buckets, but you can actually buy hoses that hook directly into your faucet. If for some reason your faucet doesn't have an aerator that you can pull out and slap in one of those adapter bits, you can fill up a bucket of water in your sink and then just use a pump to pump that into your tank. I hate using buckets. I did that all through my 20s and I'm over that. Regardless, water changes are very easy to do. You can simply do a water change without having to do maintenance on your whole tank, scrubbing, trimming, cleaning your filter, all that stuff. So maybe you do one really heavy maintenance session a month, and then the rest of the time you just do a quick water change. Super easy. Now, the second way to get rid of nitrates in your tank is by removing ammonia. So like I just talked about, through the nitrogen cycle, ammonia gets broken down into nitrites and then nitrates. But if we remove ammonia from the water, we prevent nitrates from ever building up. So there's a couple products out there. The most common one is activated carbon or charcoal. And you can just buy a container of that, stick it in a mesh bag, and shove it in your filter. And that's a form of chemical filtration. So basically the carbon just cancels out that chemical ammonia, hence the chemical filtration terminology. It's a super easy way to do things. It costs a little bit of money, but carbon or charcoal is really not that expensive. But, you know, if you have a huge tank, it can add up. The third way is to remove nitrates in the same way that we remove ammonia. There's some different products out there, Denitrate, or just nitrate removing pads. You can stick those in your filters. So this method and the ammonia removing method may not be the best to tackle huge levels of nitrates, but in combination with water changes, it can make a substantial difference. The one thing you need to be aware of, though, is that you do need to have water pumping through this chemical filtration media. You need to have either a canister, hang-on back, or sump filtration. That way it's constantly pumping water through that media. If you were to just stick a bag of that in a tank that had a ton of nitrates or ammonia with no flow, it might remove a little bit, but by and large, that'll be an ineffective method. So keep that in mind. This method won't really work well with undergravel or sponge filters. The fourth method is one of my favorites. It's using plants. So live plants consume nitrates as basically a fertilizer. And when you have a ton of plants in a tank, you'll gradually remove nitrates from the water. I should note though, as effective as plants are at removing nitrates from tank water, it's not a great idea to rely on this method if you have tons and tons of big fish. Like if you have a tank just stocked full of South American cichlids, big angels and severums and stuff, then live plants probably aren't going to be enough to keep your nitrates down, at least to a safe level. So I would recommend in this case you either combine this method with water changes. You can also add some nitrate and ammonia removing media into your filter, and that should do a great job at keeping your nitrates down. And now it's time for the easiest method, that last half one that I was talking about, and that's simply don't stock your tank full to the brim with fish. If you don't want to do water changes, you don't want to add a bunch of filter media in, and you like the idea of plants, then you can add a very small bio load to your tank and basically get away with doing very, very little maintenance. And the way that works is, I already mentioned that fish excrete waste. If you have large fish, it's too much for the plants to maintain on their own. But if you find that perfect balance, you keep a small school of tetras or danios, rasboras in a medium to large size tank, then you can get away with a very small waste load, very small amount of nitrates, and it's just enough that the plants can consume those nitrates. Then you found the perfect ecosystem aquarium. As soon as you start loading your tank up with big fish or excessive amounts of fish, you're going to destroy that balance, and you're not going to be able to get away with low amounts of maintenance. So just to summarize things, the best way to get rid of nitrates in a tank that's stocked full of fish or that you're using heavy amounts of fertilizer is to do big water changes once or every other week. If you don't like the idea of doing maintenance, you can throw in some filter media or use live plants or a combination of all of those methods. And then the last thing, if you really hate doing maintenance and you want to get rid of it altogether, then you can set up a small ecosystem tank. I just want to clarify though that you really absolutely need to be careful with stocking fish. Being a professional aquarium cleaner and someone who's worked at fish stores for a number of years, I know that the overwhelming majority of people do stock their tanks like really to the limit. That's usually the first question I get is, how many fish can I put in this tank? How big a fish can I put in this tank? So if you're the kind of person who's willing to, downplay fish a little bit and take on more of a holistic look, then the ecosystem aquarium might be for you. That's all I got today. Thanks a lot for watching. Drop a question if you got any. Leave a comment if you enjoyed today's video. Consider subscribing. See you in the next one.